Well, welcome to At the Open Gate. This is our Beyond the Spotlight series, which is our opportunity to shine the light on some extraordinary leaders that we have the pleasure of getting to know. And there are unique ways that they influence their teams. And so today joining me is Pete Mayer, Deputy City Administrator and Interim Public Works Director for the City of Tukwila. Glad to have you here, Pete. Welcome.
Well, thanks, Nancy. Glad to
Yeah.
be here and hope what we share might be of help or benefit to others.
Yeah, I know you've got quite an interesting story. And to give a little background for folks listening, Tukwila is a city, kind of, I call it at the center of the universe in the Puget Sound area. I think it's about, and you can correct me, maybe around 21,000 residents, but you've got incredible retail, industrial base right south of Seattle. So it's a very unique city as a hub. Did I get that accurate?
Yeah, and kind of the uniqueness is maybe a sleepy little ville at night, but we balloon to up to 150 to
Yeah,
200,000 people depending on the season during the day because of
yeah,
the high retail and warehouse districts that we have here in the
yeah.
community. So it's a different community during the day than it is at night.
Yeah, very crazy. And you've taken on the role of interim public works director, and I thought that was such a fascinating journey. And we wanted to elevate during Public Works National Public Works Week, so we thought this would be a fun conversation to share. So, would you mind sharing a little bit, like how did you land in this role and your unique journey?
Uh, it's timing,
Hmm.
opportunity, we'll say,
Right.
necessity, opportunity, maybe right set of skills,
Hmm.
for the circumstances. Probably a combination of
Yeah.
things. Certainly, um, kind of unexpected, but in this kind of line of work of local government leadership, you have to kind of expect the unexpected
Hmm.
and really work those pivoting and adaptability muscles in circumstances. So we, just to give a little context, I've served in a number of roles here with the city in serving the needs and of the mayor and how I can best support the mayor. And so I had stepped into the deputy city administrator role that also included director of Parks and Recreation.
Hmm.
And then soon therein, there was a need to step into public works. And so we were able to elevate some folks in Parks and Recreation to lean in and take some interim leadership assignments to take care of Parks and Recreation to allow me to then lend focus to public works. Kind of ironic or coincidental timing as I was in the midst of that transition, we lost our finance director and our
Hmm.
senior finance manager to other opportunities. They left in very
Wow.
close succession. And we were just in the midst of launching our biennial budget process. So it was lots of little challenges all stacked in a row of
Yeah.
now needing to lean in and really help lead the budget process for the city at the same time take on leadership of about a 75 FTE
Yeah.
department, and so kind of all those challenges certainly stretched and exercised some of those strengths.
Yeah, I imagine you're feeling a little stronger at this point in time. I and it's not easy, yeah, right? Taking over whole new team, and yet you have all these competing priorities of your time. And, we really like to kind of tie things into different leadership competencies. And one competency that we've been profiling the last few months has been called understanding others. And so, just to give a little definition of that, it's means people understand why people and groups do what they do, and also we're able to pick up on the intentions, needs, maybe motivations of other people. And so you're taking in all this data from all your various roles and then also a new department where probably one of the most important things is trying to understand your team, understanding the culture of the team as you're getting your footing there. So as you were taking on that leadership role, I'm sure you were exercising, like you said, a lot of your strategic thinking, but also the relationship building. So how did you utilize that particular competency of understanding others as you were getting to know and onboarding with your new team?
Well, a great question. I had the benefit of having, some awareness already within the
Right.
organization due to my, previous role or roles, and so I had
Mhm.
some familiarity in the organization. But certainly, it's centered really around intentionality
Mhm.
and coming in. The circumstances that led to the need to have me step in were not ideal, and so there were some residual challenges and issues I needed to address and sort through, mitigate as I stepped in. So one of the things of intentionality that I did is I scheduled one-on-one interviews with the entirety of the administrative and engineering staff, and that was 20, probably around 20 plus people, and just engaged them in one-on-one, had some specific questions to get conversation going and learn a little bit more about them and kind of what motivates, inspires them, what are some of the barriers for them in doing their best work. um, and so did that, as well as I spent time with our superintendents in the field with ride-alongs. I'd scheduled ride-alongs with each of them, streets, and utilities, each of the utility areas, and facilities. So I was able to uh, really, I dedicated, it was very deliberate, intentional, dedicating time to learning
Yeah.
and listening. And through that was then able to begin to ascertain some common themes amongst those interviews, and then I replayed those common themes back, protecting
Mhm.
the confidentiality
Right.
of those discussions, but playing back, here are some key themes that I heard that then I made a focus of beginning to address. So it wasn't me coming in with some prescriptive, I
Mhm.
want to change public works. It was really trying to empower um, staff to share what support they needed and how I could best be in service to them. So that service orientation, servant
Mhm.
leadership orientation, just being really intentional.
Yeah.
And there's it's managing through the tensions too, because there's
Right.
tensions of I've got this no new budget responsibility. I've got to sort through a very adaptive problem.
Right.
um, I'm trying to help other staff be successful as they lean in and take over for
Mhm.
me in Parks and Recreation, and so
Mhm.
lots of tensions with being intentional.
Yeah.
But I think the investing in that foundation, the go
Mhm.
slow to go fast, is so critical. So my best advice is like really try to make that a priority,
Mhm.
because you will build on that the benefits of making that commitment to others is will only benefit you as time goes on. So that'd be
Yeah.
my best advice.
Yeah. No, and just a huge amount of intention, and discipline, I would say, when you've got so many other competing priorities. And you make me think about the fact that, every leader I know, and I'm sure that you know too, is overloaded and rarely has time to even think. And just what you did, that taking that time to understand someone's motivations, it takes time, it takes energy, effort. And I think to a lot of people, it seems maybe even like a luxury, right? We get so task focused. So, what motivated you to take that time?
I think for me, informed by a lot of past, experience and
Mhm.
background, and what I know appeals to me in terms of someone who dedicates that time and that interest. Um, it was an opportunity for me to really convey my convictions around service, genuineness, and I had a lot of people come to me and have commented on my genuineness, and like they recognize that can't be faked, and they
Yeah.
know if you're just giving them the time of day, if you're just telling them what they want to hear. And so those things motivate me. Those are things that I desire in my working relationships, is that openness, that transparency, some
Mhm.
vulnerability,
Right.
creating some vulnerability. I mean, that comes with trust building.
Yes.
But I just really, I personally do best in those environments, and so that was kind of my North Star of kind of my starting
Yeah.
point of, I think for the vast majority of people, that's very appealing. And I also knew that those were largely some things that were very absent under prior
Mhm.
leadership, and so
Mhm.
there was some deficits there
Mm.
that I really wanted to focus then my effort on. And this gets into some of our maybe upcoming conversations
Yeah.
around,
Yeah.
how we leverage our strengths.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it almost sounds from that people maybe were hungry for that, just like a real hunger for to be
Very.
noticed and heard and understood.
That's right. And
Mm.
and I think you see that pretty quickly in terms of how people receive you, and
Mm.
receptivity is like you kind of get this sense of where you struck a nerve.
Mhm.
Not maybe not with everyone, but with a vast majority where like you're heading more towards the target than not.
Right. Right.
So being mindful and perceptive to that, I think,
Yeah.
is really important.
Mhm.
And again, that trust building, that the speed of trust, it's
Yeah.
really, um the more you invest on that front
Mhm.
end, the the more you can accomplish and more quickly as time unfolds.
Under.
So I just knew I needed to have the confidence that eventually we could benefit and leverage that. And
Mhm.
so I kind of just knew the discipline of like, this is very important to
Yeah.
invest in this front end. And I'll tell you um, probably the hardest thing for me transitioning out, and I'm close to transitioning out,
Mhm.
is just the relationships that I've built
Yeah.
in my time here. That's going to be the hardest thing for me.
Mhm.
Now I'm still on scene, but just a little
Right.
bit more removed. But the connection I feel with the staff and that
Yeah.
they've made me feel, that's powerful stuff.
Um,
Very intoxicating.
I I couldn't agree more for sure. Yeah. Well, and what a great testament to the work that you've done in this time. And I find it interesting because you mentioned, you were in the public, in the parks and recreation side of things is really your background. So very different. Well, maybe not very different, but somewhat different culture. What had you found different, if anything, about the culture there as compared to what
Yeah.
you were used to?
No, great question. I think there's always nuances from one work
Hmm.
group to the next. Um, I think, and each work group kind of has their own little nuances or uh, uh, challenges. Coming in, I learned, that there's uh, operations, frontline
Hmm.
operations folks have a different heartbeat, and perspective than the engineering
Hmm.
functions. And so opportunities to better bridge, engineering and operations. So, you design it and it gets built, and then operations takes it over. Was operations engaged in some of that design and some of that build
Hmm.
activity, informing how it can be better maintained down the road? And so that was a little bit of an operational, a nuance to the
Hmm.
work, as well as there were some recent transitions of work functions from public works to our community development department, and there's still a lot of residual issues that have not fully been addressed or mitigated as a result of
Hmm.
those moves, and they were made right around the COVID time to kind of
Yeah.
create more of a one-stop permitting concept. um, but a lot of things didn't, many things didn't get tended to because as it was unfolding, COVID hit. So,
Yeah.
and never got fully revisited and resolved. So I learned some things there, and we're actively working those issues right now through a cross-divisional, cross-departmental set of work groups. And that's being really well received by staff because these are issues and priorities they identified. I didn't. They
Mm.
identified as barriers to being able to perform really effectively.
Yeah.
And so through a lot of concerted effort, we identified and prioritized, and then we're empowering them to fix it.
Yeah.
And so, so that was another area of how our relationship working across departmental lines.
Mhm.
That was an area that was unique,
Yeah.
and a little different than maybe what some of the other departments
Yeah.
have. And then I think lastly, just the importance of standards and policies.
Mhm.
That's very biblical and very
Mhm.
critical in the public works
Mhm.
world is design
Oh, yeah.
standards
Right.
and policies and code and
Right.
how those get applied and interpreted in real life. And so
Right.
learning a lot about the challenges of conflicting codes and conflicting
Yes.
standards and working through that.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. There's much more risk if we don't have things exacting, I think, in that world as opposed to maybe
Right.
some of the other things that we do. Yeah. So I
Yep.
get that. Well, and it
Yep.
also sounds like you really built a lot of opportunities for people to communicate, which takes a lot of intention and time as well to create that space for that. And so that kind of leads me to there's a lot of unique demands in the public works space where there's high risk, people are in the field a lot, maybe fewer opportunities to interact. And what advice, do you have for other public work directors? What would you say they need to do to build an effective team culture?
I think being, curious,
Mhm.
one a benefit you could look at it as a strength, there's a liability
Right.
potentially, right? Like, I haven't managed public works in my past. I've managed
Hmm.
aspects of public works. My
Hmm.
public health administration experience, I managed environmental health that had a lot of public works related elements to it.
Hmm.
And I've managed assets and capital projects and parks. So I've had aspects of it, but not the totality.
Right.
And so that I think in some ways that's a strength because I come in, I'm naturally curious. So I can come
Yeah.
in with kind of a bit of a fresh slate, no preconceived notions really, and really start to build up from that. Um,
Hmm.
and I think whether it's a circumstance like that or whether you're coming in as a seasoned public works director, I think the power of curiosity,
Yeah.
the how important it is to build relationships and at a pace that makes sense and that you can sustain, and
Hmm.
making yourself really available to people. It's again, it's that service oriented servant leadership where it's an issue or a matter of concern to the employee, and you make it part of your own to help them resolve it and maybe help their supervisor be attuned to
Hmm.
that to help resolve it. And that I think goes a long way. That notion of like your problem is my problem, or your
Right.
opportunity is my opportunity. And um, I think being really mindful to that. I think whether you're
Yeah.
a seasoned leader or maybe less experienced in a certain portfolio set, exercising some of that I think can be really effective.
Yeah. Well, and you struck me as someone who has a really good sense of curiosity and that real willingness and desire to understand others. I think that doesn't come naturally to everyone. And some folks really maybe struggle. Like we talked earlier, I think some folks can be very task oriented. So just digging a little deeper, I mean, that was a great answer, but digging a
Yeah.
little deeper, what would you say to someone who maybe struggles with their sense of curiosity or trying to understand people? What advice would you have?
So like in cases where I'm trying to mentor and coach staff. So some techniques I try to use is ask some open-ended questions of them
Mhm.
around what else or who else might help inform you in this work, and what who isn't in this space that may help or hinder what it is you're trying to accomplish. I think asking some of those kind of probing open-ended questions
Mhm.
to begin to get them to think about beyond just being tactical and task oriented in
Mhm.
this to who else might I need to engage? a helpful strategy is social mapping, the notion
Mhm.
of social mapping, which is this idea of who is in who is around you in within your universe that you likely need to or should or are interacting with that can help you be successful or in turn maybe not as successful,
Right.
and really actually try to map that out, diagram that out.
Mhm.
And not only within your department, but across other service areas and department.
Mhm.
And maybe helping staff chart some of that to where you begin to build a broader awareness for like, oh, I'm working in a very adaptive environment, very dynamic environment, and there's other people that I need to be maybe thinking about.
Mhm.
So it's I try to do it through coaching and through use of a tool like social mapping,
Mhm.
curious, open-ended questions uh, to help people think about
Yeah.
maybe things they aren't.
Yeah. That's a great suggestion, Pete. And what comes to my mind with the social mapping idea too is that it seems like folks that struggle with these things, it's, understanding others, I always say seems like a really squishy concept. And for folks that are really analytical, if you give them a tool like social mapping, something that you can follow, that oftentimes can help to kind of make this sort of squishy thing a little
That's
easier to
right.
do. So great
It,
suggestion.
it's a vision, and so I like visuals to,
Hmm.
to help me understand the concepts or the relationships. And so
Hmm.
it's a way to maybe appeal to people who, can better understand that. I think there's some project management type competencies where I have a thing and I have a timeline and there's these tasks I need to accomplish them, and they're thinking very, very tactically, and
Hmm.
so which is great, and we need those we need good
Right.
effective project managers, but also part of that is you're in service to a customer, right?
Right.
And so you're delivering this on behalf of an internal customer as well as an external customer. So how are
Hmm.
you engaging? Who are those customers? And
Right.
how are you engaging them along the way? And so, yeah, so I think trying to frame it into maybe terms of like customer service
Hmm.
orientation, internal, external, social
Hmm.
mapping are some ways to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm going to turn a little bit. I'd like to talk about Clifton Strengths and how maybe that can be applied to this concept. And for the folks that are listening that aren't familiar with that, Clifton Strengths is a tool by the Gallup Corporation that measures 34 different talent themes. So it's a bit of a game changer, not thinking about what we need to fix about ourselves, but really how can we leverage what we're already talented at. And so, Pete, you and I had the opportunity to look at your strengths a while back, which was super fun for me. And I remember you had a strong concentration of what we call the executing themes in your top 10, with your number one being what's called a ranger. And so it's a perfect fit for someone who wears multiple hats, right? You're constantly having to shift and change priorities, and it's probably almost like breathing for you. And then your second being strategic, which is a thinking theme. So helping you kind of analyze the big picture of this situation in a very quick way. So I think those are a great combination, especially for someone who bears a lot of responsibility as you do in your role. Um, so how have you found those top two, just focusing on those for a moment, a ranger and strategic, how did they help you go about again, building those relationships with this new team.
Yeah, great question. And it can, for those who may not be familiar, it can maybe sound almost a little
Mhm.
skelter, Jekyll and Hyde ish
Yeah,
of like strategic thinker, but getting her done, being
right.
task oriented, focused on executing. But they really do, I think, I take a lot of pride in trying to figure out how this puzzle piece fits into a broader puzzle. I'm kind of a systems oriented thinker,
Mhm.
and I don't. Try to avoid being random and knee jerk, but also
Mhm.
recognize there may be times and opportunities where you need to quickly execute and you need to be
Mhm.
decisive. So it's not like paralysis through analysis and we got to wait
Mhm.
for all these other pieces to fall in before we can execute. It's a this and a that,
Yeah.
kind of set of circumstances. And um, I think being really focused around what are the barriers and challenges to success, and
Mhm.
engaging part of the execution, strength is um, kind of leaning on knowing how to bring what and who to bring together to then execute the
Mhm.
task, and to kind of think what are the first 3 steps, 5 steps, what might be some of the next steps beyond that, and kind of so you're really exercising that advanced thinking, that
Mhm.
strategic lens, but being really focused on execution. You gotta get
Mhm.
step one done in order to do step two, in
Exactly.
order to do step three. And so I think being really, really mindful and focused on
Mhm.
those those things. I think um, the getting good consensus around um, and it's not, and again, it doesn't have to be perfection. Here's what we see as the greatest challenges or
Mhm.
barriers, and if there's kind of some broad consensus around that, and then really facilitating some ideation around, okay, what might be some strategies near term, long term to address that.
Mhm.
And again, through a lot of curious inquisitiveness and engaging other people, because I really try to come across like um, I'm not the expert in all
Mhm.
of these things.
Mhm.
I'm more like a student of a system and a process, get a better outcome.
Yeah.
And so I want to honor a process and a system, because a lot of times the product is the process in
Right.
government, local government. A lot of time it is.
Mhm.
It is about how do we bring a community through something,
Mhm.
and at the end of the day, it may or may not get executed, but a lot of the product in that was how we brought the community through it.
Mhm.
And so so those kind of nuances I think to keep to be mindful of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I just think what a powerful combination that arranger and strategic can be. Like you said earlier, that you're thinking about all the elements, but at the same time, you've got that second talent that's helping you, or that first talent that's really helping you execute, which a lot of that's one of the challenges I think of the strategic theme is those of us that have that in our top five struggle with executing sometimes. So you got a powerful combination there, Pete.
Well,
Uh,
and and then the balancing too is I gravitate towards having multiple tasks, multiple challenges, kind of simultaneously.
yeah.
Um, I'm adept and get drawn to being able to kind of juggle multiple balls, and
Mhm.
it's being mindful um, that while that's a strength, you have to be also mindful for some of the liabilities that can associate with that
Right.
in terms of pace and priority and capacity of others
Mhm.
to help you juggle those things. So it's a constant self-reflection
Yeah.
for me on like how many things do we start, right?
Right.
Projects that we start simultaneously, and what really can be sustained, because it is such a strong passion and
Right.
orientedness that I have. But you've got to be really measured, and it's okay to
Right.
pause. It's okay to like
Right.
pause, reflect. Let's table. We now know some things that we didn't know before. Let's pause
Mhm.
and table that, come back to that. It's okay to take a breather.
Right.
The mindfulness piece of this is just in the last 5 years, I'm much a different leader than I was. And a
Really?
lot of it
Mhm.
is around being really centered and being far more mindful and
Mhm.
self-reflective.
Mhm.
And I think that has served me well.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the go slow to go fast in the beginning.
Right,
That's, yeah, sometimes we have to
right,
stop and pause. There's value in that. And I think we're always so pushed to demonstrate return on our investment of our time. And sometimes these, yeah, reflecting things don't really seem like they're churning in the moment. But
right.
thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned, Pete, in the beginning that it sounded like the team was really responding to your genuineness and sensing your genuine desire to understand them. So again, digging a little deeper on that one, I know you sort of touched on this already, but again, another thing that a lot of leaders I think strive for is being genuine and authentic. It's kind of the word of the week a lot of times, but how, what would you say to someone who struggles with that, right? And how could they kind of overcome maybe and be
Yeah.
be more genuine or come across more genuine?
Um, I think it's really trying to, if you can kind of slow your mind down a little,
Mhm.
um, dedicate some space for informality,
Mm,
of just checking in with folks. I mean, it's little things. It's like
right.
meandering into folks' offices or workspaces, or showing up at the shop and just shooting the hay.
Mhm.
It's I really try to practice acts, kind of random acts of kindness and appreciation. So I I frequently bring in flowers for our admin,
Mhm.
send off a few notes of appreciation and thanks.
Awesome.
Um, um, I really try. I'm far more, and maybe it's just part of the aging process too. Is I'm far more expressive of my appreciation to people.
Mhm.
I was far less comfortable with that earlier in my career, of like
Interesting.
having a sit down conversation and saying, I really appreciate you.
Mhm.
And here's an example of why.
Mm.
That just rolls off my tongue now,
Mhm.
whereas previously it didn't. And um so I think it's allowing yourself to be a little vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think you might be surprised by what you get back.
Mm. Yeah.
I think it's demonstrating your appreciation for others, and being mindful to how they like to be
Yeah.
recognized, appreciated. Not everybody is name up in lights or
Mhm.
big to do. Some of them is just a quiet aside.
Right.
So being, mindful to that, but I think
Yeah.
being deliberate about appreciating and recognizing people. It's a firm handshake and looking someone in the eyes.
Mhm.
It's another key thing that I can't put a big enough price tag on is,
Mhm.
um, say what you mean, do
Mhm.
what you say.
Mhm.
The follow up and follow through, um, is so critical. I want people to know they can trust that if they make a request of me and I make a commitment, I'm following through on that.
Yeah.
And and it's simple. It's simple things, but to know that staff can count on me, like and particularly if I get delayed, I'll go to them and say, I have not forgotten about our
Mhm.
conversation from a week ago. So they know, and I prompt it. I don't wait for them to come and, like, hey, Pete, I haven't heard anything for a week.
Right.
I mean, those little things just go a huge way. Like,
Mhm.
like they know their leader's in their corner, and
Yeah.
he's busy, but he hasn't forgotten about that concern.
Yep.
I just sat down with a staff member this morning, after conversing with them yesterday about some concerns they had. I immediately I had the opportunity to convey some of those to our mayor, and
Mhm.
I made a deliberate effort to corner her for 2 hot seconds this morning to say, "Hey, A, thank you for sharing what you did with me. B, I had the opportunity to pass that on to
Yeah.
our mayor. And thirdly, it is of concern and of importance to him, and he's confident we can work through that together."
Wow.
And that took me but 20 seconds to loop back.
Right.
But I know the impact that that has. And that intrinsicness for me, I'm highly intrinsically motivated. And that's something we've talked about in our time working
Mhm.
together too. And I think, I, um, uh, I'm motivated by that intrinsicness, and I know those are things that speak to me that make me even more loyal and want to work harder for my leaders.
Right. Well, and what struck me too by your description of that feedback you gave your team member is specific, and you also gave real clear information about the outcome of their actions and how it was received. And so it wasn't just thanks for doing that, but here's
Right.
why and here's the impact you had too. So
Right.
that's awesome. Yeah, and I have to believe that person, yeah, has probably had a good impact on them. So
Yeah.
um, I'm curious, one thing you said, if you're going to allow me to probe a little bit on your answer. So hopefully it won't feel like I'm making you too vulnerable, but you mentioned that um, it was tougher earlier in your career to have those gratitude types of
Mm,
conversations. And as you were saying that, I'm thinking, I have a feeling a lot of people probably can
mm.
relate to that and have a similar evolution. So, what was it about those types of conversations that you found more challenging earlier in your career?
I I think it's that comfortableness with vulnerability, and I
Hmm.
think through my career, um, been some highs of highs and lows of lows, and it's provided me, and maybe it's the mature, as you mature through your leadership journey, you just, gratefulness comes to mind, and
Hmm.
just, I'm always reminding myself of, how fortunate and grateful I am, for the opportunities that I have, as maybe as challenging as they might be.
Right.
And so it's really kind of, from I'm just inspired to convey, um, that appreciation more openly. I've always, and this is my mother's trait, I've always, been one to jot little notes,
Hmm.
thank yous and notes of appreciation. And I use a little, there's a local company in Edmonds, Copendium, if I'm saying that right. They
Hmm.
do these little, um, square cards that have a little window. You can peel off the
Yeah.
window, and it has a
Yeah.
quote,
Oh,
and they're
cool.
thematically oriented. They're little boxes of these cards, and so they're a fun little thing to put in a envelope with a card, and they can
Yeah.
peel back to see the quote. And it's everything, and again, the broader themes are very broad, from
Yeah.
appreciation to, carpe diem to, you
Hmm.
know but I've always that's always been a tool in my tool chest, is kind of
Hmm.
utilizing that. And I think over time I've just gotten more and more comfortable to being just more verbal,
Yeah.
and sharing that. And I think both are important, any ways you can
Right.
show appreciation, and thanks, where people feel seen and heard, I think all the
Right.
better.
100, I agree with you. Yeah. And you have a few other interesting themes in your top 10 that I wanted to explore that I noticed when I was thinking about your ability to build a strong team. You have belief, which I think was number three for you, or four, which means we have a strong set of core values that are unchanging. And you also had responsibility, which means we're committed to stable values such as honesty and loyalty, which I've heard a lot already through our conversation today. And then finally, you had individualization, which is a little harder one to understand, but and that's actually a relationship building theme, which means we have a gift for noticing the unique qualities of each individual. So again, your highly tailored gratitude expressions are an example of that individualization theme. So as you think about kind of those different themes and how they, supplemented your arranger and your strategic, how might maybe your sense of belief, responsibility, individualization, you don't have to test all three, but if any come to mind, how might any of those contributed as well to this transition?
Yeah, I think, the my values are really rooted in service and excellence, and, I'm kind of unrelenting, conviction of there's always a better way. Um, there's someone's thinking about, dreaming about building a better mousetrap,
Hmm.
and my challenge is to find that, or similarly, I love the personal professional challenge of looking across different disciplines and what can we learn from different disciplines that's applicable to our set of circumstances. And so kind of this value set around, again, it's curiosity. But that's what I love about, I spent 5 years in the public health, leading a public health agency, a kind of a foreign land to some degree
Mhm.
for me. But there were so many parallels
Yeah.
in that, and that really spoke to my level of values and responsibility, of service, and in making these connections, like, oh, I've been here before, right?
Mhm.
Like this is familiar, and one of the benefits of a longer career is you build up this amazing set of resources called a professional network,
Right.
uh, that, like, oh, I've got to get you in touch with this person. You guys will hit it off. They've got great ideas about that kind of problem, and it's like a little bit more of like a conductor, facilitator, convener. I think a lot of those skill sets are very helpful in stepping into a role like I did, because of those personal relationships that have been built, that individualization, um, and be able to, like, pull from that and connect it with other people who could really benefit from it, and then build really great lasting relationships. So I take it as kind of a personal challenge and funness, and through the COVID crisis, I built a network like that with park and recreation colleagues in Washington, Oregon, and California, and we brought in even Nevada, and it was just like all like built on this notion of, like, we're all trying to figure out a similar challenge, and some really great, dedicated, convicted, strong, healthy convictions, that these professionals held about serving others, and, like, let's not reinvent the wheel. Our challenge in Washington is similar to our challenge in California, and let's get connected. And we've built these really great, long-standing relationships as a result. So
Yeah.
I enjoy it, and I think there's a lot of benefit to it.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And so when we reviewed your Clifton strengths, we talked about one concept that is, where as opposed to trying to improve weaknesses. And how has that kind of mindset impacted you?
And you cut out for the first part of that question. Could you just repeat that?
Yes, yeah. So it's just saying that a part of a principle, I would say, of the Clifton strengths is that we're far more effective and when we're utilizing our strengths as
Yep,
opposed to spending time to fixing
that's
our
right.
weaknesses. Yeah. And a lot of research bears that out. 40 years of research with the Gallup Corporation that people tend to be more engaged, they stay longer with their employers, et cetera. And so
That's right.
how has that paradigm change impacted you?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Because, like anybody, we're human, right? And we kind of can dwell on our deficiencies. Is the glass half full or half empty? And as born and raised Catholics, you got the Catholic guilt thing going for you, and you're
Hmm.
never quite good enough, and all that funness.
Right.
But I think it has really reoriented me, and in a way, like, maybe a metaphor is, and I just shared this with our leadership team a week ago, is if you have two cups, of different heights, your goal as a leader is to get everyone to the top of their respective cup, not to try to make both cups the same height. It's recognizing everyone brings these unique qualities and traits, and you're trying to get them to the maximum of their capability, and even when they think maybe they aren't capable. And so it's really that focus that I'm trying to bring. It's that strengths based.
So Pete, we were talking about how the Clifton Strengths has a few principles, and one of them being that people are most effective when utilizing their strengths. And so it's not so much a matter of improving our weaknesses. And how has that knowledge impacted you?
I think through the course of my career, in looking back, I think it's really helped in the sense of, avoiding unnecessary energy and time, focused on things you're less good at, and instead really celebrate the things that you're effective at. And
Mhm.
finding those, I think a key is finding those and seeking out those opportunities that can play to your strengths, I think is really critical. And and other things I've that are I think important is um, you you might be good at things or more proficient in things, but it may not bring you joy and happiness and
Mhm.
satisfaction, but you're good at them.
Mhm.
And I think the Maslow's hierarchy of needs here,
Right.
and working towards actualization.
Right.
Um, I think the magic is trying to find where you can really play to your strengths in a set of circumstances and environment that just bring really great satisfaction to you. I think that's the
Yeah.
ultimate. And I think it may be a constant search. It might be dynamic. It might be fleeting. You may go
Yeah.
in and out of that actualization stage.
Right.
Um, and I think every step of that makes you a better, more effective leader, more
Mhm.
aware. Continuing to learn and build on that, and try to create environments where you can kind of level out that curve, right? To
Right.
where it's more often than not, you're really playing to your strengths in an environment that you're really satisfied and jazzed about. And the other thing I'll share too that I've learned on this journey is even your strengths can become a liability if you
Mhm.
over exercise them. They're like a muscle. And
Right.
so if you over utilize it, you will damage it. And
Yeah.
so being mindful to that too of how you use the vast array of your strengths. And some circumstances require the use of a different kind of strength than another, and so you can rest it and
Yep.
that kind of thing. So I think I know there's a lot of metaphors and analogies all mixed
Yeah.
into that,
Yeah.
but those are things that I constantly am thinking about in terms of how I show up in spaces. And okay, is this a circumstance where I just need to listen and observe? Is this where I need to be more command and control, front of the room,
Right.
whiteboarding, and simply facilitating? Or do I need to be a provocateur? Do I need to
Mhm.
be asking these curious, open-ended questions and kind of pushing people to think, maybe a little differently? So I got to size up those different circumstances the best I can, and
Right.
then try to play to that in my role. And
Right.
I try to more often than not, I try to be successful in that, but not
Right.
always. And I will say for anybody that stuck around to hear the end of all of this is, yes, you're human, and yes, you will make mistakes, and it's okay, to fail forward, learn, and
Mhm.
own that. Reflect on that a little bit, but don't don't get so high centered on your regret about the miscue.
Mhm.
Learn from it, take what you can from it, engage others about how did they see it, and what advice they might have for you, and then move on, build on it.
Yeah.
Don't
Awesome.
stay stuck on your embarrassment or your deficiency or your mistake. That's my best advice.
Awesome. And those are powerful words of encouragement that I think will wrap this up in a very nice bow. So thank you for that, Pete. I appreciate it. What a interesting conversation. And again, I thank you so much for making the time for us today, Pete. Thank you. Glad to have
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate the opportunity. Best of luck to everyone out there.